Welcome, everyone, to episode 5 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth Goldman. I go by Lori Beth on Facebook. And I created this show and have been doing it for a while. It's been extremely fun and engaging. And basically, this show is really about exploring from the different perspectives of different healers, coaches, and teachers out there. What is genuine transformation it's really looking at the question of what is genuine transformation for all of us. And what I'm most interested in, and the people who've been coming on the show are most interested in all of their own unique ways, is looking at transformation for the sake of freedom and for the sake of healing and for the sake of having more of who we are and more intimacy with life versus transformation and healing that has a kind of subtle agenda or strategy so that we can get what we want in life. So all of the people that have been coming on the show are exploring this in their own way. And today we have a very exciting guest, spiritual mentor and catalyst, Ernest Morrow. So I'm going to have him come on the show, and then I will introduce him more, and we will start the interview. So it says it's adding you. Just waiting for. Yay! It worked.
Hey.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be exploring the topic of empowered intimacy, and I just want to give a brief intro of who Ernest is. Like I said, I would call you definitely a spiritual mentor, and I like the word catalyst as well, like I said, and like you think of yourself. And Ernest's work is really about experiencing more intimacy with life and experiencing more intimacy and freedom with your moment-to-moment experience. And I know that, you talk a lot, Ernest, about let me think what I'm trying to say. You talk a lot about, like your work is really not about kind of like healing per se, even though healing happens as a byproduct. It's not really about getting anywhere. And I would say that that's very true for the work that you do. I've had the opportunity to work with Ernest, and so I have kind of a firsthand experience of what he does. And I would also say the other part of your work that has been, is really a beautiful aspect is just being with the truth of your experience, and how in doing so that opens up more space to experience freedom in the moment and a kind of release into the now and into, like I said before, it's just this real kind of fine-tuned intimacy with each unfolding moment. So today, he's going to specifically talk about empowered intimacy, and I know that you're going to be talking about it from both kind of how to have that with self and also how that happens in relationships, and I think specifically intimate relationships with, a beloved. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And yeah. So what I like to kind of start with all of these interviews is just for you to give a context of the work that you do. Obviously, I introduced my version of it.
Yeah.
So people really have a sense of, as you move forward in the conversation, what it is that, you're doing with people, and even like sort of what your desire and value is in the work that you do.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that for me, it really comes down to wholeheartedness. And I call the umbrella of what I do becoming human, which really is, for me, this deep engagement with my human life as it is, my experience in this world in the 3D, and how to be free inside of that experience, how to be completely free to have my uncontrollable experience of being alive as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we discover that freedom, when we align with that freedom, when we embody that freedom, there is a nectar, there is a deep richness to this magic of being alive that comes through. And when we can access and channel that contact, that intimacy, that freedom to be alive as me with this moment as it is, rather than as a manipulator or a magician or a creator even, or a massager of that moment, but actually just the freedom to be intimate, then life opens up in a very, what I would call, human way. And for me, that is about being wholeheartedly here, wholeheartedly me. And of course, that has tremendous implications for our capacity to connect and to contact other, right? Because in my books, what we're all here for, and if we listen to anybody who's ever whispered from their deathbed, what's this all about? This is all about relating, right? This whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
this whole life
Mm-hmm.
is about the quality of our connection and relating heart to heart with others. And when we're on our deathbeds, life seems to be rich and full if we've related, and life seems to be hard and painful if we haven't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm not sure if right now you want to describe a little bit more about the actual work that you do. I'm going to give you an opportunity at the end for people to, at least for people to know where to find you and the programs that you're doing.
Yeah.
But it may be helpful to, share a little bit about how you do that.
Yeah, well, what I'm in a nutshell basically helping people to do, whether that's in one-on-one containers or in other uh, teachings and offerings, is learn how to access their own internal safety to have that wholehearted
Okay.
experience of being alive. So for most of us, I mean, I'm going to say all of us, we are conditioned, right? We have inherited genetic, generational, and then our own childhood conditioning, and perhaps beyond childhood if we've had traumatic events happen to us. Beyond that, that in a sense have created a false self system that is not free to have certain experiences because the story is that it can't metabolize them, or it can't survive in the face of them. And usually, of course, those are traumatic moments, whether they're chronic or acute. And so, in order to actually experience wholeheartedness, we have to find a way to create a different kind of safety, not the safety of our nervous systems, the safety of controlling and managing my internal experience to match some kind of story about who I am or what life is, but actually that dropping down into what I call the heart, to have an absolutely free experience of myself in this moment. And
Mm-hmm.
for everybody, that's a different journey. Where you're stuck is different where I'm stuck, and so we have to chart individual, very customized paths down into that essential wholeheartedness. But when we do, and we
Mm-hmm.
can move from there and amplify from there,
Mm-hmm.
things shift really quickly. And of course, that's also my take on intimate connection, is that when we can relate to an other from there, that we give actual intimacy a chance to flourish and thrive rather than contract and erode, which for many of us is
Mm-hmm.
our dominant experience inside of relationship. Is
Mm-hmm.
that love blossoms, but then over time diminishes and shrinks and erodes and eventually either evaporates or breaks. And and then we do it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just beautiful. And I really, I mean, it will probably come through the conversation just exactly. I think one of the things that you're doing different than a lot of people is really working kind of not in the nervous system, acknowledging it, but not actually having that run the show. I'm sure that that will kind of come through. You started talking about intimacy with other. towards the end there. So it seems great for you to dive in more to that topic and how you see people being able to, like, what empowered intimacy is, and then how to create this different way of relating, especially in romantic partnership.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, empowered or empowering intimacy is a way of engaging our intimate contact in a way in which it's no longer accidental, right? That we're not relying on something like chemistry or
Mm-hmm.
synchronicity or coincidence or having, attended the same workshops, so we have a little bit of the same language, and that kind of like very circumstantial um, good fortune. We're not relying on that to have the intimate contact that we want. None of that, of course, all that's great to have, especially connection and chemistry. Um, but then how do we actually use that as a path, right? And how do we use relationship and intimacy as a path of personal, uh, I don't love the word growth or evolution, but I'll use that here, right? Personal empowerment, becoming
Mm-hmm.
more of who I am, and also allowing the love that exists between me and another to reach its fullness, right? To mature
Mm-hmm.
into and become what it can be. And that to me is a very uh, intentional path that we can actually go on. And there are practices and
Mm-hmm.
techniques and narratives that we can use to guide us if that's the calling on our hearts, to not just leave this love to chance or to the best
Mm-hmm.
of our previous conditioning and kind of cross our fingers and hope it works out, but actually get inside of it and be in the driver's seat and be navigating and steering. It's not that we don't encounter obstacles, but in a sense really
Mm-hmm.
being skillful with with what that love brings up. Because if your experience is anything like my experience, what love does is it brings right to the surface all of what's in the way of our actual intimate
Yeah.
contact with another,
Mm-hmm.
which is really a mirror for my own blockage or inability to connect with myself. And so we're using this relationship as both a as a crucible, as a container for my own awakening, but also as an
Mm-hmm.
expression of that awakening and a place to actually pour my creativity and my beauty and my love and my you know my
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
essence and have that reflected back and to create more of that, right? To literally make love uh, in relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so can you kind of go into that a little? I mean, you referenced practices, and you could probably talk some about that. But also just even what you're saying is like it's the crucible. It makes sense to me, right? That it's the crucible for like anything that is not love or any way that we are kind of blocked to. When you say love, I'm guessing you mean also just like the love of the universe, just the love that's available inside of me, inside of you. It's going to kind of bring that to the surface. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably make it mostly particular. I think it includes that, but it's going to show me where am I unable to really be in contact and to sustain and stay for contact with another.
Okay, got
Um,
it.
that's
Yeah.
what, as I'm relating inside of an
Mm-hmm.
intimate relationship, what we call
Mm-hmm.
triggers or what we call, you know,
Mm-hmm.
attachment
Mm-hmm.
styles or whatever it is, are
Yeah.
these clenches that we've got, these very deep-seated patterns that
Yeah.
actually have me, if I'm not awake to them,
Mm-hmm.
leave my heart, leave the intimate space, and go
Mm-hmm.
into my what I call my nervous system. You could call it your false self or your ego. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and all of a sudden I'm in relationship with a story. I'm in a relationship with a pattern, with a conditioning. I'm in a relationship with a fear, not in really in relationship with the moment and you inside of that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so, I think the first step in this is wanting it, right? Like we have to want it. We have to want that kind of contact. And the price of intimacy is vulnerability, right? Because, and this is true, I believe, even of the price of awakening at all, is vulnerability, right? Is that we actually have to step into the reality that I am not in control,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this, you know, sometimes puts me at odds with some of the new age teachings that we're used to, right? In which we are actually seeking control. We're seeking to manifest. We're seeking to, become a vibrational match. We're seeking to, in a sense, to exert control over my moment, over my reality, over what's appearing to me, which in my books, effective or not, actually keeps me in my nervous system. It keeps all of us in our nervous system. It keeps us conditioning in our conditioning. Whereas the real essential practice of intimacy and love is the vulnerability of not being in control with anything outside of me. And that's the path. Because if, again,
Mm-hmm.
I'll check this with you if this is like your relationships, but my relationships, I can't control the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
As much as I'd like to, right? And I usually do really want to. I mean, I'd like you to do this and this and this and this and this. Right? Like, could you just please be different so that I can be okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And most of our intimacy and our effort in intimacy, up until we find another way, is used to exert influence, whether we're subtly passive aggressively doing it or we're actively aggressively doing it. We've got some way in which we're trying to manipulate this moment, which includes this other person, to be more what I want it to be, rather than resting in the safety to be in contact without control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Well, it
essentially
reminds
it.
me. Oh, go ahead.
That's
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
that's it.
It reminds me also of like why we do anything is like we're wanting to feel a certain way, right? So then we would normally exert that kind of control or manipulate, or like you're saying, to not feel something. And so it sounds like what you're saying is like, how do we actually be honest with ourselves about what we are feeling and open, like develop the capacity to open to that in the moment and open with our partners so that then we can be in real contact about what's really happening, and that sense of like, oh, I feel scared, or I don't know what's going on, or I'm angry and I want to like hurt someone, or all of that, just to be in that we're actually then truly meeting in that, in the contact of the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is, originally what this movement towards authenticity that's been going around maybe for the last 6-8 years, something like
Yeah.
that, has, it's intended to direct us to. I'm not sure authenticity, because it's become such a popular buzzword, any
Yeah.
longer kind of has that connotation, but it's like this real honest kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Engagement with
Yeah.
what's so inside of me and in the world. And if we're in relationship, it's the capacity to see and to validate and to connect with my own truth and your truth, not just the you know the essential truth or the spiritual truth or the truth, the
Uh-huh.
palatable truth or the pleasant truth, but
Mm-hmm.
all of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but my divinity being in contact with your divinity does nothing for my human being. And if you believe somebody like Eckhart Tolle, I'm already in contact with your divinity, and you're already in contact with mine, and I'm in contact with hers, and I don't even know her, and she's in contact with mine and him, and right, we're all connected on that level. But what really makes love on the human plane is that we're connected to our humanity with each other, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
my brokenness is meeting your brokenness, and we're not playing
Mm-hmm.
this game of like, let's hide our brokenness or heal our brokenness so that we can finally meet. But it's it's our cracked vessels, our broken heart to broken heart, really. And
Uh-huh.
that's, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience, what love is, what union is in a real
Mm-hmm.
human way, is that when my broken heart and your broken heart can occupy the same space and stay together. Because again, that nectar of the freedom to do
Mm-hmm.
that, the freedom to be in contact, without either of us leaving just strategy or story,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
allows
Mm-hmm.
the most wonderful, life-giving, transcendent, imminent, all of it experience to arise. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think anybody who's heart to heart, minds the earth and, goes to war, uh, that really love between human beings is what saves us all and saves this planet, uh, for future generations of humans.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, yeah, and what I hear in that last part too is that this is what you're saying actually would. If we could actually sit together in the I don't know, I don't have control, I'm scared, whatever is actually that vulnerable edge, then we're actually in real contact with each other. And that is something that our planet really does need.
Totally.
I mean, we wouldn't be able to hurt each other and cause the kind of violence that is caused if we were actually able to do that, you know, and learn to do that and commit. I mean, it's really a commitment to learn to do that because it's challenging. Um, and it just struck me what you said too about authenticity, because I've thought about this quite a bit. Just that, what does it actually mean? Like you said, I think vulnerability is a better word than authenticity.
Mm.
Um, you know, sure, in part because it's sort of gotten overused, but I think also, like, I even know for myself, I can be very real and authentic, but sometimes that's actually not what the leading edge of my vulnerability is. Or sometimes I say it and there's, like, in the background a subtle attempt at strategy or control that I'm not even aware of, right? So then the deeper layer would be like, oh wow, I want, I'm saying this to get this.
Mm.
Like, that would be the true
Mm.
vulnerability. And to me, that involves, like, that is that to me, I think the piece that I'm getting that I feel excited about is, like, it involves the lack of control. To me, those are the two things. It's like, I don't know and I'm not in control. Like, that's where the edge of vulnerability, that's where I can always check it out in myself.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have a question that comes up for me quite a bit in kind of most of the speakers that come on, because I work a lot with trauma. And so I'm very interested in how you might work with somebody who, for example, in bringing up some of that vulnerability, I mean, this is obviously what happens in attachment, they just go away, or they get completely, their nervous system gets completely overwhelmed. And so they can't actually stay in the contact,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of what your experience has been working with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Gabor Mate, who's, the great trauma guru, or one of the great trauma gurus, says, trauma isn't what happened, it's our relationship with what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that is, for me, it means my relationship with myself, right? My relationship, what's the story that I tell myself because of what happened, right? What's my relationship with my story, my history, right? Like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
story of me? And because inside of all trauma is, I've never found, in working with all the people, for all the times, that trauma doesn't have a story with it, right? There's some
Yeah.
subconscious story about me, which I start to tell myself, right? Like, I am this way, I am this, I'm unsafe, or I'm not worthy, or I'm, you know, unlovable, I'm going to be abandoned, whatever the story is that I connect with my trauma. And realizing that whenever that story is rehearsed or that card is played, that's in a sense what the nervous system does to create sameness, to create that loop of
Mm-hmm.
sameness, of familiarity, of this is who I think I am and who I need to be. And so I'm stuck inside reproducing actually my trauma as my life, as my
Yeah.
identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we work with this, um, we're we're finding a way to come, first of all, to come into contact with the story, not to change the story, right? And this is, again, this is a huge point for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
intimacy with the story that lets the story become optional. It's not changing the story. It's not setting out to change the story. It's intimacy with I, right? That from my nervous system, I don't want the story to change. I might say I do, but there's actually a place in me that in which I've this has become part of my identity, or it wouldn't be trauma, right? That's my take on it, right? That trauma is actually an identity piece. I have defined myself in terms of something that's happened to me. And so now in order to be me from the nervous system, I have to reproduce that identity. And so I have to reproduce my trauma. So it's like I have to find out who I am underneath that. And that means finding that place that I can connect to the story and just stay there at first, right? And learn to feel that which I don't want to feel. Learn to, you know, and learn actually to source the sense of control or familiar pleasure. Pleasure is not the wrong word because I don't mean it in terms of like sensual pleasure, but the pleasure of reassurance, the relief that I have in knowing who I am, even if I'm traumatized. And so how this shows up in relationships is that I'm not right. I'm relating to you, but I'm not really me. Essentially, I'm relating nervous system to nervous system. Eckhart Tolle, for another Eckhart Tolle reference, but he calls this the pain body, basically, right? So it's pain body to pain body, or nervous system to nervous system, and inside of that, there's no intimacy. And so for most people, the motivation to finally get underneath their trauma is actually not necessarily their own experience of being alive, but the fact that love and connection and intimacy, primarily in their romantic relationships, is impossible, right? That nervous system to nervous system, pain body to pain body, it, like it doesn't satisfy that circuit is not really being made. And it's intrinsically troubling. I know, again, like you've probably been inside of some of these relationships. I certainly have, in which I'm like, ugh, like, right? Like I know that real connection is possible and like I'm aching for it, but I can't get there. And you just keep on being, I think you need to be different, right? I think you need to be something, because I'm pretty sure it's your fault probably inside of this, and you think it's my fault. But that original promise that brought us together is right is eroding, it's evaporating, it's disintegrating before our eyes. And then we say, oh well, we fell in love, or we grew apart, or we weren't a match. And for me, that's a bunch of baloney. It's like, no, there was something there was real potential, but we couldn't find a way to stay in our hearts for it, and we went to our nervous systems, and from our nervous systems, all that potential just got blown away.
Well, it's interesting. That's interesting. I appreciate that model. It's different than a lot of the ways that I've worked, but I can also see it as the same, because what I'm hearing you say is that it's like by contacting the story, you're actually being kind of a witness to the story. You're allowing the story, which then allows you to feel what's underneath the story, instead of kind of be in the conditioned response of the story with all of its emotions and all of its triggers. You can start to kind of break it down. Now, obviously, I mean, in my sense, people can do this in relationship with one another if they're skilled enough. And obviously, I think this is, a lot of the work that we do with outside healers or therapists or whatnot, to kind of, have that extra support. But it's an interesting model. It feels like a little bit different than what I've, sort of the way it's been, I think, spoken to before. Now, obviously, there's ways to work with your trauma, but and the triggers. And I can see how it is the story, but I think also sometimes people are just so overwhelmed, and the story's firing so quickly, or they just, kind of habitually go away inside, and it's just like they're gone. And so there's no capacity for any of that intimacy. So the way you're describing it, it makes me think it's like, can you just bring a little bit of space and light, just a little bit, like to keep opening it up so that you're actually with something that's real and not the trauma of the nervous system.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in relationship, the ground floor for that, and I've worked with couples at every stage of relationship, people that are just starting out, um, people that I knew individually that weren't together and then got together, and then,
Mhm.
people that have been married for 20 years and are about to get divorced, kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
And every time I discover that the first thing that I want to offer these people as a very simple invitation is to learn how to speak about desire in a way that
Mhm.
that doesn't assume that there's a zero sum
Mhm.
game in which I get my desires met and you don't, or you get your desires met and I don't. Because what that actually is, in a sense, the hard or the soft wiring, really, because it's not really hardwired, but the soft wiring of trauma, right, is that somebody wins and somebody loses. There's winners and losers. It's a power game. It's a control game. It's a safety game. And what trauma wants to do is reproduce this system, this very, very tight binary system, this very tight duality. And part of the way to actually very gently begin to undo some of that, the tightness of that conditioning, is to learn how to speak my desires without making you wrong.
Uh-huh.
Right? That I'm allowed to want what I want and you're allowed to
Mhm.
want what you want. And the point of
Mhm.
relationship is not that we want the same things, but that I'm here because I love you and I'm called
Mhm.
to that, to
Mhm.
support you getting what you
Mhm.
want. And you're called because you love me to support me getting what I want. And so
Mhm.
inside of
Mhm.
that, we start to, there's a little bit more technology that you probably need, but we won't worry about that for now. We start to have conversations in which we're literally undoing our trauma response by actually experiencing that relationship can be a win-win. Because inside
Mhm.
of trauma, it was always a win-lose, right? And so almost all of our traumas are relational. I mean, there are
Yeah, I agree with
the
that.
odd
Yeah.
ones that aren't, but almost all of our traumas are relational. And inside of relational
Mhm.
trauma, there was a winner and a loser, or at least it appeared that way,
Mhm.
right? Somebody who
Mhm.
had the power and somebody who didn't, and the person with the
Mhm.
power violated or abused the person without
Mhm.
the power. And so one of the ways to begin to massage that knot out of our field, out of our conditioning, is to start to experience relationship in a different way, right? And this, Sue Johnson's work talks a little bit about this, right?
Mhm.
Like the wounds of relationship have to be, healed in relationship.
Mhm.
So this is kind of my take on that: is that once we start to actually be able to own the narrative, that
Mhm.
my desire is mine and your desire is yours, and nothing about my desire disqualifies yours, and nothing about your desire disqualifies mine, and we can work together in a system to start to create collaborative wins in which the system holds both of our needs. Right, the system has both of us winning.
Mhm.
We actually begin to quickly establish a
Yeah.
basis that's not nervous system to nervous system or pain body to pain body, but actually heart to heart. And once that platform is there and we can stand on it, then we can dismantle more and more and more and more of that habit of relating. And so,
Mhm.
without having to
Mhm.
go
Mhm.
directly into the trauma itself, we can actually use the relational field to, to begin to create
Mhm.
new,
Beautiful. Yeah.
you know, new spaces from which to come at my moment. And
Mhm.
usually
Well.
love is one of the strongest
Mhm.
things. I would say it's the only
Mhm.
thing, but somebody else might have other ones. It's the thing that's
Yeah.
strong enough to actually motivate
Mhm.
me to do it, right? To get me there
Mhm.
when I might
Mhm.
not actually find that way to identify my trauma otherwise. And so it's a little bit of
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
hack.
I mean, that's true, but it also, I love what you just described because it actually is very in alignment with all kind of a lot of trauma theories out there. Because what you're saying is instead of, like a lot of trauma theory looks at kind of creating that ground within yourself
Mm-hmm.
and resource within yourself. And what you're really saying is you can begin to create that as like the third of relationship. Like And that the more that you feel, I mean, empowered, right, by this way of relating where you're both able to really hear each other and support each other, like you said, then when the harder, you know, it's like you've created a ground, you've created a foundation that then can allow all kinds of other things to come up within that container. And you feel, I think, both individually and as a couple, feel empowered. It was I was laughing because I'm experiencing this in the relationship that I'm in right now. I was like, oh, you're describing exactly what I'm experiencing, and it's working really well, you know.
Right.
And then it's allowing, there's a lot less trigger, like we've like started with more trigger things getting triggered, and it feels like right now it's like there's very little trigger, and even when small ones come up, it's just like we're both able to sort of, you know, kind of soothe ourselves and soothe the other, because there is a sense of like a kind of foundation and ground.
Yep.
So yeah, I really enjoyed hearing that. And I love it because it's also, you know, it's also bringing back in, you know, that we don't only do this work, like, yes, we're responsible for our own experience. I think you would agree with that. And like the choices that we make, and we can make those empowered choices, but we're also interconnected, and we do, you know, the work can really get accelerated in relationship, whether it's intimate relationship or relationship with, you know, a healer or therapist, or relationship with very close friends in your life. It's like we need that, and we really, like, that's how the healing happens. So
Absolutely.
and the shift.
And I think just to bring it, I don't think I emphasize this, but it begins right with the desire, which is, in a sense, you could say the return of the sacred feminine. But it really is union, right? Because it's the desire arising, but then it's my courage, my commitment, which is the masculine, or the, you know, the yin and the yang. Let's not genderize these things, the positive and the negative polarity, right? Of desire arising, and then my commitment to it, right? So I'm sourcing my desire, right? What do I want right now? What do I want to feel like? As you said earlier in the conversation, what's my experience that's calling me right now? Is it relaxation? Is it arousal? Is it, what am I, you know, what is this desire? What's this life arising, asking from me? And then the courage and the commitment to saying, this is what I want for me. And what you want for you may be entirely different, but that's not the end of the conversation. That's the beginning of the conversation. And so we're actually now grounding the whole conversation in union, right? Inside of me, desire has arisen. There's Shakti, commitment to that desire, standing for it. There's Shiva, and in that union, and it doesn't have to be after, you know, a 6-day meditation retreat on the tantric mysteries. It's as simple as, you know, ordinary everyday things that, you know, just what we want, and standing for what I want. Like, everybody's got that, you know, everybody can understand that language. And so we create that union as the foundation now for our relating. And so union outside of me becomes an expression of, or facilitated by, this union inside of me, but not in some kind of esoteric spiritual sense, but simply because I've allowed my desire to arise. I've recognized it and stood for it.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So, you know, we're working with ordinary reality here. And that's, you know, because for me, we don't have time to be at the mountaintop or even halfway, right? We've got to come all the way down the mountain and engage our human community where we all are, you know, in our, you know, because we can't wait for everybody to do a Vipassana retreat in order to start experiencing a deeper connection with each other, which is actually going to result automatically in deeper connection, you know, on a collective level and between ourselves and the earth, which we pretty badly need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's, you know, one of the ways that we can, I think, demystify the whole thing and bring it into real accessibility.
Yeah, it strikes me that we could do a whole other interview on desire, because that's a whole other topic that I think is even hard for people often to even, like, be okay with what they desire, know what they desire. And when you were talking, I was thinking, what's so beautiful about let's say intimate partnership, is that, yeah, like, me and my partner might come to it from two different angles or want different things. It's really in the meeting of that that the desire is met, whether he meets the exact desire that I have of that moment. You know, that there's that's the union to me,
Yep.
is the coming together in truth, and being with what it is and feeling our intimacy and interconnection there. So yeah.
Totally. Which is the rock, right? It's the most exciting thing is that we realize that the other gets to be other, right? It's not this project to create or transform or coerce other to be like me, right? That I'm actually safe enough to encounter other as other and leave other as other. But in the freedom to do that, again, this nectar,
Yeah.
we can call it love, we could call it divine union, arises, like this deep communion, this deep sense of closeness, this deep sense of relationality, this deep sense of compassion and love and connectedness arises because I'm me and you're you, and we're staying me and you. We're not even
Yeah.
dissolving into
Yes.
oneness. We're not even,
Yes.
becoming part of the same
Yes.
ocean of love,
Absolutely.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm me and my
Mm-hmm.
particularity, and I'm other, and you're you and your particularity, and you're other. But we now know how to hang out inside of that lovely tension almost, or polarity of self and other, and have it be no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, I know
Yeah.
from my own experience, what really allows that fulfillment of whatever the potential of love is to blossom, to flourish, to be there. And it's never ending. It's
Mm-hmm.
right. You don't get bored of that. You don't fall out of that
Mm-hmm.
love. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's infinite,
I love. Oh,
eternal.
it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have one last kind of not edgy question, but it definitely comes from my life experience. And I think I know you work with people, but this whole conversation has been about intimacy with kind of a beloved. And as someone who was single for many, many, many years and really desiring that, and actually did a lot to create it in other relationships, I'm wondering if you can just speak to that, because I just, there's a sense, I know that when I used to listen to talks like this, I would be like, okay, well, that's great. I'd really like to have that. And I'm doing my best. And, I want to experience this. And I know that we can experience it outside of, that kind of intimate partnership, but I'd love to hear your take on that.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's curious because for whatever reason over the years, it's become a niche for me for some reason. Like people, often women actually, entirely women now that I think about it, right, are like, oh, I'm going to go work with Ernest, or you should go work with Ernest because, if you do, love will happen. Um, and the way that I see that, because it's uncanny, it keeps happening with people I work with. But I'm not there as a matchmaker or a, relationship whisperer. But in my experience, and this is true in my own life as well, what keeps me out of satisfying relationship or relationship altogether is fundamentally a nervous system story, conditioning pattern that I'm not aware of, and that I just can't flip the switch, right? Because it's a safety issue. I don't feel safe enough to drop that. And what happens is, because human beings are meant to be in a relationship, we're designed to be in a relationship, and this isn't about, it's not about guilt. This is all happening. Nobody, this is not willful negligence. This is not like you're not working hard enough, so you're not in a relationship. It's not that. It's that there's probably some part of your history that might not have anything to do with you. It could be passed on from the generations that is running you, and so you're not showing up in the right time in the right place to experience connection, real connection. And so as we do the work to become intimate with the moment and intimate with myself inside that moment, I start navigating with a greater degree of safety from my heart. And as my safety of my heart expands, my range of what I can say yes to and no to also expands, right? So my no's become clearer and more aligned with who I really am. My
Yeah.
yeses become
Yeah.
clearer,
That totally makes
right? And
sense.
as
Yeah.
I say yes and no to life,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
I keep on getting new experiences, because if I go right, I'm going to have a whole new set of experiences compared to if I go left. And if my heart says go
Yes.
right, but my mind says go left, and I've gone left, the chances that my
Yeah.
partnership, my connection, the kind of love that I'm looking for in my life is going to happen down that fork in the road, low, very low to none. And it's the same thing
Yeah.
for our, you know, abundance, our material well-being. Uh, if we keep on saying no when we mean yes, or yes when we mean no, we're in the we're always in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And without
Yeah.
us having to manifest anything or control it, to me, it's
Mhm.
simply approaching the givenness of this moment, which I'm not in control of, and saying a yes and an or a no from here.
Yeah.
Taking one step. There's that beautiful David Whyte poem that says start close in, right? You start close in, you take the first step, right?
Mhm.
And not don't worry about the fifth step. You take one, right? Because that step then conditions the options that are going to be available. And so if we keep on saying yes when we're a yes, and if we keep on saying no when we're a no, we're going to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
taken into
Yeah.
the places and the people that we are actually harmoniously able to connect with. Why is that? That's a mystery, right? I mean, you could say you could call that life, you could call it the universe, you could call it God, you could call it love,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
works reliably. And
Yeah.
you know, uh,
Well, it really, I think really what you're saying, which was really beautiful, and I'm just going to reiterate it for everyone, which is just that again, it's a choice of when you're saying when you're ruled by your nervous system, which is often what people are in romantic relationships. If we look at like even at the level of attachment theory, like I can look at like, oh, I kept attracting men who were not fully available, right? And I wasn't in my heart a yes to them, and I knew that.
right,
But because for whatever reason that happened a couple various times.
yeah,
um but so again, it's like until I got to the place that I was like completely honest and said, no, I'm not doing that anymore, and that is, I'm not a yes to that. And it actually doesn't make me feel good, then it like shifted my course. So I can relate to what you're saying, but I think it's a really, your approach is just really beautiful at it, because it gives it, again, it feels like it's more empowerment. Like it's like there's no trying to change what's happening, which I feel a sense of relief around. And I think I often felt like other people were trying to, like, the messages out there were like, if you just work with this or that, to sort of heal and shift your attachment. But to me, this is more the most direct route to shifting your attachment, because you're just you're being honest with how the nervous system is responding to life, but then going back into the heart and back into your actual experience, and then saying yes from that place. And I think, that's one of the beauties of working with you, obviously, is that you will, push someone to, I mean, in working with you, you'll sort of be like, okay, is that really the truth? And what is the truth that's underneath that truth, right? And so I think having someone who can actually help you to be honest, brutally honest with yourself, is kind of the first step to that. But yeah, I really appreciate that approach, and also that perspective, because I also think it's like a loving, inclusive perspective that, of course, I mean, some people, of course, if you don't want relationship, then you don't have to be in a relationship, but many people want it, and it's something that, I think has been very challenging for a lot of people. So
absolutely. And especially, it's interesting that in our kind of conscious, progressive, whatever you want to call it, new age
yeah.
circles that we both run in, right? There's an epidemic of people who want relationship or a quality of relationship, and are
Mm-hmm.
seemingly unable
Mm-hmm.
to get it. And to me, that's part of the indictment of some of the dominant ways that we've been going about teaching and
Yeah.
cultivating wisdom from inside those circles, is that they're not really resulting necessarily in sustainable, deep intimacy. And because to me,
Mm-hmm.
if something's out there that doesn't create sustainable and deep intimacy, I mean, like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Every human
Yeah. Yeah.
I talk to, that's at the bottom of what they want, right? Every song on the
Mm-hmm.
radio, That's what we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we sing about. That's what we've sung about for 10,000 years. And
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think we have to start navigating intentionally towards that as really the fruit, the flower, the fullness of our human desires to be in contact with others
Mm-hmm.
and to share ourselves like that.
Yeah.
So if whatever we're doing, however beautiful, however spiritual, however whatever it's happening, whatever whatever color our chakras are and how well they're spinning, if it's not resulting in human intimacy, it's
Yeah.
not complete for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it probably is not even primary, secondary.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, I think you've done a beautiful job in this, whole conversation and really describing kind of that other way and that new way of doing it. So thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful and enlightening conversation. And I'd love for our viewers to know how to reach you and about any of your upcoming programs or containers, your one-on-one containers, any of your offerings. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, Facebook is easy because we're on it. So the link here, that's my personal page, which is also how I kind of communicate. So that's easy. And then if you want to find me on the web, it's ernestmorrow.com, ERNESTMORROW.com. And yeah, and there's a variety of ways to plug in. My passion is working in intensive, deep containers with people. And so that's always the kind of where most of my energy goes. But there are also some current and upcoming ways to tap in, which are a lot more entry level, you could say, before somebody wants to jump in and
Mm-hmm.
swim in the ocean of truth. It can be a little intense.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say what those are?
Yeah, I've
Or
got a program just going to be actually launched in a week or two. It's going to be totally free, which is Falling in Love with Your Life,
oh,
and that's going to be a 5-part video series. So that's going to be part of the foundation for what I do. And then there's a follow-up program from there called 15 Days to Freedom, which it's going to be a lot of these practices that we've hinted at, but that really are what I teach people and couples in containers. And we're just going to get them out there so that we can start having these conversations and hopefully create more and more and more literacy and fluency around just this becoming human. And then from there, we can blast off into oneness if that's what our desire is. But at least we'll have the capacity to be with one another, in a real way.
mm, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ernest. And my name again is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook. And I am about to start posting some really exciting new offerings. But for the time being, I also do intensive containers, 3, 6, or 9 months. And the work that I do is I've been a therapist, and I'm also a healer and a coach. And I really do a lot of just deep healing work, rewiring the trauma through rewiring the nervous system. I would say hardwiring happiness, like real and genuine happiness, and also doing like a lot of the work that I do is really just about sitting in the fire of your honest and truthful experience with compassion and love, and helping you to open to that more and more and more. And through our contact with one another, there's often the dissolving of emotional and somatic blocks that are there, and also it often leads to core wounds. Actually, most of the time my work like pretty immediately gets to your core wounds and your core attachment wounds, and so then we really are able to be with that and heal that, which has a tremendous impact on the rest of your life and your relating and your ability to have choice and freedom in all of your experiences. So if you're interested in working with me, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will, like I said, I'll be there'll be some offerings that will be coming out on my page. So thank you so much, Ernest.
Thank you.
And yeah, that was a great, exciting conversation. Please spread this conversation with your friends if you think that other people will benefit from it. And next week, we'll have an exciting new speaker on a totally different topic. So thank you
Right
again.
on.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for doing this. Bye.
Yeah, so fun.